this for a while. So we have a number of issues that we still want to address. So the commission on the deaf is aware of this. I need you to come forward, Anthony. Can't see you from back there. Hello, everyone. So I have a doctor's appointment for my knee, and so we had made a request through the agency, gave them some times and numbers and the like. So I showed up for my appointment, and the interpreter was late. And so I was somewhat surprised because they came from another town and they were late for the appointment. So once we were left, we had a second appointment. I gave them a different, I said, this is a preferred agency that I would like to go through here. I got to the appointment, and the interpreter never showed up. And I said, where did you make the request for the interpreter? So they were going to an agency that was from out of town. So my concern was that we have an agency that is working from out of town. They're not showing up on time or didn't show up at all. And so they gave me the name of the agency, and I felt like it wasn't reputable, and they were coming from another town. And so that's my concern, is they're not sticking with people that are in the area that know where we are and show up on time and are there on time. I don't have an easy answer. Some I can answer and some I cannot. So we will put these up on the board, but let me do explain that, as far as the various categories that we have. We have the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then you'll have I'm thrilled that the ADA law passed. That was very helpful for us to be able to get access to a number of entities. And there are great things about this law, but there are also some bad things about this law. Dodie says, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty understanding here. The law's difficult to understand, yes. ADA, it's a law that has rules, and it protects our rights of deaf and hard of hearing individuals. But hearing individuals don't always understand what's entailed within the ADA. That's what hurts us. So the point is that you as deaf individuals need to understand the ADA and where you need to get excited and where the roadblocks are within the law.
I will add that on a prior video that Dodie has on DGM, me and her went through a good discussion of the ADA and gave copies that maybe they could print out, keep in their pocket.
Yes, and at the end, we'll have a very quick community resource. And so would you repeat that at that time so that we can share that as a resource? So let me just explain a little bit about the ADA law. You have rights as an individual to qualified interpreters. And who defines qualified? ADA does not say who qualified is, but in Kentucky, thank God, has defined what qualified is. And qualified in our state says you are a licensed individual. Then RID, the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, says qualified is, they follow the code of ethics, and I, as an interpreter, I may be qualified as an interpreter, but am I qualified to interpret for a biology class? No, I'm not. If they called me in to interpret at a university biology class, I would say, no, thank you. I can't fingerspell those terms, I don't understand those terms, and I would mess up that interpretation for that deaf individual for sure. I'm not qualified for that assignment. So qualified means different things. I have to look at myself as an individual. ADA says that I'm qualified, and you may look at me as qualified. So ADA says qualified, but it does not say consumer choice within the law. It does not say qualified is based on consumer choice. So therefore, you as individuals have to say, well, what does qualified mean? Marsha wants to add to that.
And again, we went through this on the video, but you're right. For the private sector, it does not say consumer choice. That's the reason we have went to the interpreting community and to tell them, you all, we need you, but you need us too. So if you're going to screw around with us, we're not going to be helping you. So take your contract and let's get them fixed, because your contracts are hurting us. That's the problem. However, over on the public sector, Kentucky Administrative Regulation absolutely does lift right under qualified consumer choice. The commission has no choice, the access center has no choice but to secondary go with consumer choice. It's in the administrative regulations. So,
yes. Yes, under the ADA, it says they have to be qualified. It doesn't say anything about consumer choice. And so while we're thrilled that we have to have qualified individuals, it also limits us in some ways. Under licensure, you're right. The licensure says that under the qualifications for interpreters must be licensed, and it has consumer choices must be considered. Considered. Consumer preference must be considered. So what does that mean? Considered. And I don't mean to interrupt you, Rachel says. But just to clarify, you said that the consumer choice was listed. Are you saying that that's listed within the law? I'm just trying to find out where you're saying this is listed at, Marsha. I just need to, Marsha.
no, that's in the Kentucky Administrative Regulations.
So it's in the administrative regs, okay. I just needed clarification for the notes. So where, you say within the Kentucky Administrative Regs,
No,
so is it within the law? Is it within the Access Center? So, yes, okay. It's the Access Center, okay. It's under the Commission for the Deaf, so yes, that's under our commission. Okay, I understand that. And I understand what you're saying and what you're trying to address. So we do have consumer choice that comes into play, but when we're fighting the hospitals, the person says, well, the person has a preference, but the hospital says, well, we are in contract. And we'll talk about the commission and their role in general in just a moment. So in the private sector, there are a number of freelance interpreters that used to be across the state, not as many as, as many as we'd like. We would love to have 300. Or we do, we're excited that we are now at the level of 300 freelance interpreters, but it's still not enough to address our needs. So, business is business. Business is business. We have businesses that set up as agencies, and those agencies do private contracts with a number of interpreters across the state, and if that interpreter has contracted with that particular agency, it means that they are no longer available for freelancing. So then that agency becomes, as an agency, has now changed as far as the terminology. That individual is no longer a freelance interpreter. They work for the agency. And so they're under a different category. So there may be that this agency contracted with the state or with the hospital or whatever. Then they have to bid it out, or they have to have a procurement policy, or those types of things. If you have an agency and you contracted with them, then you have to negotiate, and you may become an exclusive contract with that hospital and the like. So then there's no flexibility. So the interpreting may be limited to the agency that the hospital selected based on a bid, based on a contract, or other reasons. The Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing has tried to work with the hospitals and has tried to work with the courts or wherever it may be that you're selecting individuals from. And now we add to that, as you brought up, WellCare, where now we have insurance companies. So now we've got state agencies, we've got the private sector, and now we've got insurance companies that are contracting with individuals. So the insurance company may not understand as far as making a selection. You've got an interpreter in Western Kentucky who's going to drive all the way to London Well, of course, the chance of them being late is going to be there because of the travel distance. And where's the insurance company calling from? They may be calling from New York or from Illinois or from Colorado or from Texas. They don't know where those job assignments are at. I mean, and Rachel adds, when we have freelance interpreters, are you all familiar with what freelance means? It means they're independent. You know, I'm not under a company, I'm not under an agency. I do my own interpreting. I don't work, well, some freelance, some individuals who are freelance will work for an agency. But, you know, you're right, some work for several agencies, but, you know, I primarily am a freelance interpreter, which I can select who I work with and who I do not work with. You know, I don't work for one particular agency. I may do work for various agencies. So I have the freedom to select who I'm going to work with or for. So I am not mandated to go interpret for any one organization because I don't contract with them as an individual working for the company. I'm rather a freelance interpreter. So why do freelance interpreters end up making a decision to go under an agency?
They're not working through and under an agency.
Oh. She said that private agencies also will not hire freelancers. Her comment was just like with hospitals, they would prefer to work with one entity and have them select the interpreter rather than having to make multiple phone calls to find an interpreter for that assignment. So if you call and you book an assignment and then you try to schedule myself, and I'm a freelancer and I have the ability to look at my schedule and I look at my taxes, my 1099, my earnings, and I have money for this and money for that. So some agencies say to the interpreter, if you come under our agency, I'll take care of all of your phone calls and you don't have to worry about looking for a job. I will give you various assignments throughout the week. I will help you with your tax forms. I will keep track of all of your assignments and the like. And the interpreter's like, great, you handle all of those for me, because it's hard to take care of that business end of interpreting. Back in the day when we had freelancers, but understand it was easy for me to fill the job, but if you say, well, that company called me and I'm going to go ahead and freelance for this job, that's fine, you can go, because the agency did not make contact with them. Or if you would rather be under an agency, hey, I'm under the agency, or you can do agency and freelance work. So it depends on that individual. The agencies did fill a void of what interpreters did at one time as freelancers. But we still have one or two agencies that still don't force interpreters to stay under them, or they're exclusive. They're allowed to work for the agency, but they continue their freelance status. Now, some agencies are exclusive. If you come under me as an agency, then you work for the agency and you no longer can freelance. They're looking at what's best for the community, what's best for managing their business, and if that agency, doesn't worry about, how they're working with the community and the like, then sure, there's going to be problems. I don't see that as what agencies are doing, because they're trying to provide the best services that are available. They're trying to coordinate. They're trying to learn what's the best fit for the deaf individual and the interpreters that work for their agency. And I see pros and cons at the commission on how this works. One detriment is that how it's hit the community's ability to select or choose a freelance interpreter of preference. If the agency says that that individual is no longer allowed to freelance, or that the deaf community contacts them and you already have a working relationship with that deaf individual because of trust issues and the like, then that's fine. But if they're exclusive in that agency, meaning that they are limited to only using that agency, then it diminishes our pool of freelancers throughout the state. In California, for example, in Texas as an example, they don't have those issues. They have a number of freelance interpreters, they have a number of agencies, but they're not exclusive. Some are not, because they have more than enough resources and more than enough interpreters to be able to hear the voice. Now, to address the issue that you brought forward, you have an agency site. We're working through an agency. They contact the hospital and say, we can take care of this for you. You make one call to us and we'll make all the contacts, we'll reserve the interpreter for you, bill it, and the like. Now, in the past, the hospitals weren't necessarily required to have the shots that are required for HIPAA and hepatitis and all those types of things. It was always required for years for any employee of the hospital, anyone who worked under the hospital was always required to have various shots to meet the requirements for the hospital. But now, it wasn't enforced with interpreters that came into the hospitals at that time where they had to have the shots and the like to work for the hospitals as a freelancer until HIPAA regulations became more stringent, and then it made it more difficult. The first ones that were in Kentucky that said, hey, this isn't going to work, you have to have the shots. The first hospital that required that was University of Kentucky hospitals. The Louisville hospitals didn't make that mandatory. And so then it became an issue, and it only became an issue in the last year or so for hospitals to mandate that you have to have that. 2 or 3 years ago, that wasn't a mandate, and we didn't see a problem with that prior to the last couple of years. So what we're seeing now, we have to make sure that the interpreter that's hired that goes to a hospital, have you already had your shots? Well, you can't, then you're off the list. You have to bring in proof of your drug screen, of your hepatitis shots and the like, and keep file on those individual interpreters. And so now it's become quite a challenge to find the interpreters that meet the needs. And by going to an agency, they can say, well, let me make this easy for you. I'll contract with me, exclusive contract with me, and I will assure you that all the interpreters that you need will meet your needs under the HIPAA law, where they have their shots and have met the mandates that you require. For a hospital to say, can we do that? Can we bid this out? Can we talk about that? So then they talk with their attorneys and the like, and so they started doing a cost analysis. And so, yes, they realized that we'll contract with that agency because they're going to take care of this. Rachel adds, let's look at it from a business standpoint. You know, for those of you who are in business, you know, you've got all of these different requirements. You know, you've got an ASL specialist, you have sign language needs specialists for those deaf individuals. So, do you need an interpreter? Do you, as a business agent, realize that you need to say, oh, what's your need? You have ASL, you have PFC, you have C, you have all those. Oh, are you an interpreter? Okay, they just know you're an interpreter. But they're not knowledgeable about that they have to be licensed. They're not knowledgeable that they have to have various certifications. Do businesses that do business with the deaf community know all the rules and regulations and know all the needs of the deaf community? They do not. So when businesses start to realize all the requirements and what they have to do to make sure that the interpreter that they have for the deaf individual that they're doing business with has to meet all of these regs, if an agency calls in and say, hey, we know what to do, we know what the requirements are with our state, we'll be able to protect your needs and meet the needs of your deaf clients, then of course a business would want to say, sure, take care of this for me. I'm more protected legally as well as getting my consumer taken care of.